大家好，欢迎来到科里英语课堂。今天我们要和大家一起学习一下最近时事新闻中经常出现的与新冠疫情全球蔓延相关的高频词汇。我是你们的主讲老师丽丽老师。
Hello, welcome to Corley English. Today we will cover some vocabulary that you might see on the news recently in relation to the spread of COVID-19 into a global pandemic. I'm your second instructor, George Corley.
我们知道人类的语言会随着社会环境的变化而不断发展更新，任何重大的社会变革都会带来与之相关的语言变化。当前的疫情作为一场全球性的危机，给人类的语言带来了很大的影响，不仅加快了一些与疫情相关的新型词汇的衍生速度，同时还激活了一些旧词汇，甚至将它们推上了热搜榜。今年年初，牛津英语词典的编纂团队分析了一个囊括有80亿词条的语料库，这些词语均源于2017年到2020年4月份的网络新闻，并将研究结果发布在了他们官网上。
Yeah, as they write on the OED official site, the most striking change has been the huge increase in frequency of the words coronavirus and COVID-19 themselves.Before 2020, coronavirus was relatively rare outside medical and scientific discourse, while COVID-19 was only coined in February. Both now dominate global discourse.
大家可以一起来看一下他们提供的这个图表。从这上面我们可以看出 coronavirus 和 COVID-19 这两个词从去年12月份到今年3月份在新闻语片中出现频率的攀升速度。这个速度还是蛮惊人的，对不对？另外，他们还按照词汇在新闻中出现的频率，列出了今年前3个月位居前20名的关键词汇。他们的研究结果显示，进入2020年之后，冠状病毒和新冠肺炎在时事新闻中的出现频率大幅度增加，并于3月份在新闻语片中占据了绝对主导地位。
That's right, as they point out on their site.In January and February, some of the key words related to coronavirus, others referred to other world events. In March, however, every one of the top 20 words was in some way related to coronavirus.
大家可以参考一下下面的这个表格，看看具体有哪些关键词位居新闻语片高频词汇的榜首。与冠状病毒相关词汇已被标红。到了7月份的时候，他们进一步将词条增加到了100亿，并继续分析了3月份之后网络新闻中的高频关键词。这一回他们列出了每个月使用频率最高的前25名。大家可以看一下他们发在牛津官网上的这个表格。我们可以发现，今年4月份到6月份，几乎所有的上榜词汇都与疫情有一定的关联。很明显，冠状病毒和疫情对词汇的影响还是非常大的。所以这节课和接下来的几节词汇课，我们就带领大家一起学习一下出现于新闻语片中的与当前的全球大流行相关的高频词汇。话题方面，我们考虑了一些华人朋友们的建议，还参考了今年4月21号发表在医学网络研究杂志上的一份报告。这里提到了网友们比较关注的疫情话题，一些华人朋友们想要我们重点讲解一下与肺炎症状及诊断相关的词汇。这些内容我们会在接下来的词汇课中讲到。还有一些朋友想要学到一些看病实用英语，在之后的社会文化课程中，我们会特别的给大家介绍新冠时期的看病流程和注意事项。感兴趣的朋友们到时候可以关注一下。
Coronavirus, or the coronavirus.Coronaviruses are a class of viruses that cause a wide variety of diseases, from some forms of the common cold to COVID-19 to Sars. However, when we talk about the coronavirus in 2020, we are generally talking about the particular virus that caused this pandemic we are experiencing.
很明显 coronavirus 这个单词是由两部分构成的，分别为 corona 和 virus。Corona
is the Latin word for crown.
Corona 这个词的中文释义主要有3个，分别为冠状、冠状物、日冕、光圈、光环，而第二部分 virus 也就是病毒了。今年年初，冠状病毒开始进入人们的视野，大家习惯用皇冠状来形容这种病毒的样子，还有不少人甚至在前面加上了一系列的修饰语来形容病毒的多彩多样。我们也可以在网上看到各式各样色彩斑斓的图片。那么电子显微镜下的新冠病毒的真实模样真的是这样的吗？
The answer is nope. The colorful 3D image you see all over the news is not how a coronavirus actually looks to scientists. It's just an illustration, and the colors are just there to highlight parts of the virus.The actual photos researchers use are in black and white because the virus is too small to even see with light. They have to use electron microscopes, which bounce a stream of electrons off the virus to create an image.
所以咱们网上看到的五颜六色的冠状病毒，其实是插画师们通过建模软件后期加工合成的。这样做的目的是为了让新冠病毒的结构变得更可视化，更方便人们理解。说白了，我们所看到的仅仅是插画师们的艺术作品，而电子显微镜下新冠病毒的真实面目，其实很像半个世纪前出现在老电影胶片里的带凸起的细胞结构图，中间稍暗，外围更亮一些。虽然插画中新冠病毒的样子比较像皇冠，但我个人觉得用日冕和光环来形容冠状病毒的形态会更贴切一些，毕竟那才是它显微镜下的真实模样。
Yeah, actually, you are right. According to a note in Nature from 1968, to early researchers into coronaviruses, the viruses looked like the sun's corona. One of the researchers later said it resembled a halo.So there might be a few different inspirations.
所以正如柯老师刚才提到的，在早期的科学研究中，科学家们其实是用日冕状和光环状来描绘该种病毒的，而不是新闻中常用的皇冠状。
There are coronaviruses found in both animals and humans.This coronavirus is particularly deadly. SARS-CoV-2, or SARS-CoV-2. This is the technical name for the virus that causes COVID-19. You'll see it in print fairly often, but I don't hear people saying it often. In fact, because I haven't been able to find video or audio of people saying it,My transcriptions here are just based on my own assumptions.
没错，虽然我们在读新闻的时候会经常碰到这个术语，但在现实的音频和视频新闻中却很少有播音员真正的读过它。所以柯老师根据美国人的发音习惯，给出了上述2种读法。
SARS is an acronym for Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome.
柯老师刚才用到的 acronym指的是首字母缩略词，是一种通过组合每个词的首字母生成新词或专有名词的构词方法。我们可以发现，构成 SARS 的4个字母分别来源于以下4个单词 Severe, Acute, Respiratory, Syndrome。 翻译成中文也就是严重急性呼吸系统综合征。大家可能对这个病毒的学名不大熟悉，但你们肯定都知道它的另一个名字——非典型肺炎，简称非典。
非典 is caused by a virus known as SARS-CoV.
不难发现，跟在 SARS 后面的 CoV 是 coronavirus 的缩写。
We call this virus causing the current pandemic SARS-CoV-2 because it seems to be closely related to the virus that causes SARS.
啊哈，没错，引起当前大流行的病毒的学名为 SARS-CoV-2， 也就是在原来非典病毒的学名后加上了数字2，因为研究显示这两种病毒的氨基酸序列极为相似，属于同一个病毒种。
Pigs appear to be immune to SARS-CoV-2. Today, a number of existing vaccines are being studied to see if they might offer cross-protection against SARS-CoV-2. COVID-19. COVID-19 is an abbreviation for Coronavirus Disease 2019. It is the official name of the disease chosen by the WHO. It was chosen to be neutral and discourage discrimination against Chinese people or people from Wuhan while accurately naming the disease.
大家在读中文版的新闻时，应该已经发现，全球不同华人聚集的国家和地区对 COVID-19 采用的译名也不尽相同。比如香港和世界卫生组织采用的是 COVID-19 的直译名，也就是2019冠状病毒病。而中国大陆则采用了直译名和新型冠状病毒肺炎这两个名称。中国国家卫生健康委在2020年2月7号发布的公告上，还特别的给新型冠状病毒肺炎指定了一个英文名称 Novel Coronavirus Pneumonia， 简称 NCP。 大家特别的注意一下这里的 novel 当形容词用，表示新的、新颖的、新型的。比如说 a novel idea， novel problems， a novel genetic mutation。 pneumonia 的意思为肺炎 as in He was hospitalized for pneumonia. 他因为肺炎住院了。当然了，这是在官方病名出台之前的再用名。世卫组织的直译名出台后，中国大陆好多媒体和网站上更多的采用了官方名，也有不少文章还保留了新冠肺炎这一名称。
Have you been in contact with anyone who has tested positive for COVID-19? COVID-19 has changed the way we live our lives. Although these are the technical terms, there are a variety of other words you may hear on the news and social media. For one, in less technical contexts, people usually don't make a clear distinction between the virus and the disease. Many people will simply refer to both as the coronavirus, since even though coronavirus refers to a large family of viruses, most people will know that we are talking about SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19. You might also hear other terms like COVID. As you notice, it essentially drops the 19 for brevity. For example, we have developed new procedures for treating patients with COVID. Procedure here means a standardized way of doing something, especially the usual or correct way.
医学里通常指的是可行的治疗方案，很多情况下也可以很具体的翻译成外科手术。比如我们可以说 It's just a minor routine surgical procedure. Don't feel too nervous about it. 它只是一个常规的小手术，你不要太紧张了。
Another name you may hear for the virus or disease is the Rona. The Rona is a playful abbreviation of coronavirus. It's only used in very informal contexts. For example, in this tweet where someone says, "When we thought 2020 was going to be our year, and then the Rona happened." Yeah, I got the Rona a while back. No, I can't go see you. We've got the Rona out there. You may also hear Corona, which is another playful abbreviation of coronavirus. For example, I hope I don't catch Corona at the store. We need to stay inside so we don't catch Corona. Contagious. A disease that is contagious is able to spread from one person or animal to another. Diseases vary in how contagious they are, with COVID-19 being a particularly fast spreader. Contagious can also describe a person who is at a stage of the disease where they can infect others. COVID-19 is highly contagious. You may be contagious even if you have no symptoms. White House coronavirus advisor Dr. Anthony Fauci said Friday the coronavirus is so contagious it won't likely ever completely go away, contradicting statements made by President Donald Trump, who has repeatedly said COVID-19 will eventually vanish. Infectious. An infectious disease is a disease that can spread through some pathogen getting into the body to infect it. It's unambiguous evidence that there is infectious virus in aerosols. Infectious diseases are still a major challenge for public health. People will often use the terms contagious and infectious interchangeably, but they do not mean exactly the same thing.
Infectious, contagious 的中文都可以翻译成有传染性的。虽然在一些情况下两个词可以互换，但在被用来描述疾病的传染性时，它们却有着一定的差异。
The key point of an infectious disease is that there is some pathogen, some germ, that gets into the body to cause the disease. This could come directly from another person or from objects the person touched.
当用 infectious 形容疾病的时候，说明某种病原体或者病菌可以通过某种途径进入人的身体，使其患上该种疾病。具体的可以是通过直接接触感染者，也或者是通过接触某些被污染的物体而使自己感染。
When an infection is spread like this from one person to another through contact, that's called contact transmission.
用中文可以翻译成接触传播，也就是病原体通过接触的方式进入被感染者体内的整个过程。
Contact transmission includes direct contact transmission and indirect contact transmission. Direct contact transmission involves immediate contact between one person and another. Indirect contact transmission involves an object that becomes contaminated by touch, then spreads the infection to other people by touch. We can get infected with COVID-19 via direct contact transmission, like touching or kissing an infected person. People can get COVID-19 through indirect contact transmission like sharing daily items with their infected family like towels, eating utensils, bedding, clothes, and so on. We need to be wary of both direct and indirect contact transmission. However, there are some infectious diseases that require more than just contact. Malaria spreads through mosquitoes injecting the parasite into your bloodstream, for example.
而还有一些 infectious disease， 比如柯老师刚才提到的疟疾，是经按蚊叮咬或者是输入带疟原虫者的血液所引发的感染。也就是说，一些 infectious disease 需要一定的媒介才可以将病原体或病菌注入人的体内，使其感染该疾病。
So we can say, for example, there is still a high incidence of malaria in Nigeria, an infectious disease with Anopheles mosquitoes as its carriers. Contagious diseases, by contrast, only include those diseases that can be spread simply by contact with a person or an object that has been touched by an infected person. Contagious diseases spread very easily from person to person without an intermediary.
而当用 contagious 来形容某种疾病的时候，说明该病可以在人与人和人与物之间仅仅靠接触就可以传播开来，不需要任何媒介。也就是说，刚才我们所讲的有关 infectious 的接触性传播，对 contagious 全都适用。从这里我们其实可以很清晰地看出来两个词的语义关系。
We can actually use one sentence to describe their semantic relation. That is, all contagious diseases are infectious, but not all infectious diseases are contagious.
Sure. Concise yet to the point.
So malaria, as I mentioned, is infectious, but not contagious because it requires the mosquito as an intermediary.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Tetanus is another disease that is infectious but not contagious. The bacteria actually breeds outside the body, and you get infected by getting a cut on something that carries the pathogen.
柯老师刚才举的另一个可以用 infectious 但不能用 contagious 修饰的疾病是 tetanus， 也就是破伤风。破伤风属于创伤性感染，是一种特殊的细菌通过创伤进入人体所引发的感染，不属于接触性感染，所以不能称为 contagious disease.
Meanwhile, COVID-19 is both infectious and contagious because you can get the pathogen directly from another person through droplets.
Of course. That's sadly true. 当然了，上述的区别仅限于疾病这个语境。当 infectious, contagious 用于隐喻来形容某事物具有感染力的时候，两个词是完全可以互换的。比如，我们可以说 laughing is infectious or contagious. George has a very contagious or infectious passion for delicious food.
Spread. Spread in a more literal sense refers to covering a surface with something, like spreading butter on bread. But when applied to a disease, it refers to the disease itself infecting more and more people. Now, new research and anecdotal evidence is starting to point to kids being just as able to spread COVID-19 as adults are, especially if they don't take social distancing precautions like wearing masks. The coronavirus can very easily spread through a community. We need to take stronger measures to stop the spread of COVID-19.
Person-to-person transmission.
Person-to-person transmission is a pretty transparent term, meaning the ability of a disease to spread from one person to another. To slow the spread of COVID-19, low-income households need affordable telephone and internet access to prevent person-to-person transmission. Keeping a distance and avoiding crowds will help limit person-to-person transmission. Community transmission or community spread. Community transmission occurs when there are cases that cannot easily be traced back to a known carrier. The presence of community transmission shows that the disease is out in the population rather than in small traceable groups.
我们经常在新闻中听到或读到社区传播这个词。一般来说，当一个地区持续出现感染源不明的病例，或出现感染源不明的局部爆发时，就算出现了社区传播。社区传播一旦开始，病例的感染来源不容易查清，病例不能及时被发现，疫情的扩展速度也会加快。
New Zealand has now gone 101 days without any community transmission of the coronavirus, and life in the country has largely returned to normal, an experience far different from the havoc the virus is causing elsewhere in the world. Public Health Madison and Dane County is announcing several new cases of COVID-19 that indicate community spread of the virus. We need to reduce community transmission before we can send kids back to school. Droplet transmission. A droplet is just a small drop of liquid. You can break it down to drop and let. Let is a diminutive suffix in English.
这里牵涉到英文中一个很常用的直小词缀或小称词缀 let。人们用这个后缀来表示某物体积很小、很可爱。比如在 book 后面加上 let 可以构成 booklet， 在 peg 后面加上 let 可以构成 peglet。同理，我们在 drop 后面加上 let 构成 droplet， 可以翻译成小液滴、飞沫。
The coronavirus can spread by riding inside tiny microscopic droplets that are released into the air as we talk or breathe. If everyone wore a mask, we could stop up to 99% of these droplets before they reach someone else. We need to wear masks to prevent droplet transmission. Respiratory illnesses are often transmitted through droplets from the mouth and nose. Aerosol. An aerosol is a cloud of very small particles or droplets that are light enough to hang in the air. This relates to COVID-19, as there is recent evidence that SARS-CoV-2 can be spread through aerosols.
气溶胶这个词我们在新闻中也会经常碰到，指的是悬浮在空中的固体颗粒或液态物珠，具体的实例包括云、雾、尘埃和固体粉尘等。
Converging lines of evidence indicate that SARS-CoV-2, the coronavirus responsible for the COVID-19 pandemic, can pass from person to person in tiny droplets called aerosols that waft through the air and accumulate over time. Recent studies have seen virus particles spread through aerosols. The presence of the coronavirus in aerosols means that we may need to strengthen our containment measures. Airborne transmission. Airborne transmission is the ability of a disease to be spread through the air. While droplet transmission travels some distance before falling to the ground, airborne transmission means the pathogen can hang in the air for a significant time. Some research is suggesting that COVID-19 can become airborne when carried in an aerosol.
空气传播指的是病原体从感染源排出后，通过漂浮在空中的固体或液体微粒而侵入到人体的全过程。
A growing body of research has made it clear that airborne transmission of the coronavirus is possible. Since COVID-19 is capable of airborne transmission, we should avoid gatherings in poorly ventilated buildings. A novel airborne disease like COVID-19 is a nightmare for public health experts. Outbreak. An outbreak is an event where something unpleasant like a war or a disease starts all of a sudden. The United States has the worst COVID-19 outbreak in the world, with more than 5 million cases according to Johns Hopkins University data. There was an outbreak of flu in the suburbs. College dorms make for a high risk of coronavirus outbreaks. Epidemic. An epidemic is an outbreak of a disease that begins to spread more broadly and persistently. The U.S. is now in the middle of what can only be described as a national COVID-19 epidemic, with cases across the country rising at alarming rates in recent weeks. The AIDS epidemic has killed millions over the decades. Epidemic can also be used figuratively to refer to a sudden rapid increase of something bad.
也就是说，epidemic 还可以用来比喻坏事的盛行、泛滥、猖獗。
For example, the governor is taking measures to end the epidemic of drug use in this state. Pandemic. COVID-19 has caused a pandemic. A pandemic is a disease outbreak that spreads across a very large region, or in the case of COVID-19, the entire world. The pan prefix is a Greek word meaning all, and the word pandemic is, of course, related to epidemic. The current COVID-19 epidemic is often called a global pandemic to highlight that it's affecting the entire world. The last pandemic of this scale was the 1918 flu. We are now in the midst of a global pandemic. The most consistent mantra of experts trying to get the coronavirus pandemic under control has been that the nation needs much better testing, tracing, isolation, and quarantine protocols. Now we are here, months into a global pandemic, the likes of which virtually no one alive, with the exception of 1918 flu survivors, has experienced. A lot of people tend to confuse these two words since both of them contain demic and both are used for disease outbreaks. The main difference, as you heard from my explanation, is about the scale.
正如柯老师刚才提到的，好多学生确实经常混淆 epidemic 和 pandemic 这两个词。从它上面的解释，我们知道这两个词虽然都表示流行病，但两者在规模上却有很大的不同。
An epidemic is an outbreak of a disease in a single community, population, or region. When a disease spreads through the human population around the globe, it is called a pandemic.
Epidemic 指的是在相对比较小规模里传播开来的流行病，比如可以发生在单个或多个社区、单个或几个国家和地区。但 pandemic 指的是全球性的流行病。疫情的传染范围更大一些，感染的人数也会更多，会对社会和经济造成很大的影响。说到这儿，我还想给大家介绍另外一个跟疾病相关，也含有 demic 的单词，也就是 endemic。这个词的中文意思为某地特有的、地方性的、风土的。跟 epidemic和 pandemic 不同的是 endemic 这个词用作疾病时通常是形容词。例如我们可以说 Yellow fever is endemic to some parts of Central Africa. Yellow fever is endemic to some parts of Central Africa. 黄热病是中非一些地区的地方流行病。
As a side note, endemic can also be used for plants and animals, but there it has a slightly different meaning. Rather than just being common in an area, an endemic plant or animal is native to and only found in a particular area.
翻译成中文也就是某种植物或者动物是某地特产的、特有的。
For example, American alligators are endemic to the southeastern United States. The giant panda is a bear endemic to central China. China is home to many endemic plant and animal species. Public health emergency. Public health emergency is a legal term. In the US, the president's administration, as well as state governors, can declare a public health emergency to do things like divert funding or make temporary orders to fight the disease, such as requiring people to stay home or wear masks. The COVID-19 pandemic is a public health emergency. The Trump administration has renewed the public health emergency for the coronavirus, ensuring that critical resources to fight the pandemic can continue while much of the country battles rising caseloads. Alarmed by rising infections, Wisconsin's governor last week declared a public health emergency and required masks to be worn indoors. Public Health Emergency of International Concern, abbreviated PHEIC. A PHEIC is something the WHO can declare in order to call a coordinated international response to an extraordinary event that is determined to constitute a public health risk to other countries. The COVID-19 pandemic was declared a PHEIC early on because of its potential to spread outside of China. On January 30th, the World Health Organization declared the novel coronavirus, then unnamed, to be a public health emergency of international concern. The Director General declared that the outbreak of COVID-19 continues to constitute a PHEIC.
好嘞，最近新闻中关于新冠疫情全球蔓延的高频词汇基本上就是这些了。建议大家课下多花一些时间，跟着我们的视频用心掌握一下这些关键词汇。下节词汇课我们会和大家一起学习时事新闻中与疫情数据相关的高频词汇。我们会在本视频结尾的屏幕右上方展示下节课会学到的部分词汇，感兴趣的朋友们可以留意一下。今天的课程就先到这儿，咱们下节课见吧。
See you next lesson. Bye.
Support us on Patreon for access to exclusive learning materials. You can follow along with a PDF of our lesson PowerPoint, download high-quality audio files to listen to our lessons on the go, or get access to bilingual transcripts of each lesson. Just go to patreon.com/Corley English, select your monthly pledge amount, and instantly gain access. Your contribution will help us to keep creating more quality English learning content for you to enjoy. Thank you!